So let's get started. Welcome to the Detroit Garden Center's Winter Seminar for 2021. And I'll
That's
let
our 29th year, Janet.
29th year?
Yes.
Oh man, I can't believe it's been that many years. And for that many years, some of you have been there every year. I can look out and see the people there. Some names I don't even know, some I do know. But it's wonderful to be with you again, and I'm glad that technology allows us to do this when the medical necessity won't let us do that. This year, we're going to talk about visualizing change in the garden landscape. For those who are thinking about making a change, I'm going to do my best here to give you an idea of how to go about doing that. I am Janet Macunovich. GardenAtoZ.org is my website, and that's what we're running off of right now, and where you can find the outline for today. My husband, Steve Nicola, is listed everywhere. You'll see him at the bottom of the page here as we get started with visualizing change. Because if I didn't have Steve and his camera and his knowledge of plants and landscapes, I couldn't do these things. I could wave my hands around and tell you what I think I see, but Steve is the one whose eye is letting us see it. I'm primarily the writer. I do carry the camera around because we're not always together. And I do take some of the pictures, but for the most part, it's Steve looking at what I've told him I'm seeing that helps me show you what's going on. So he is credited everywhere. We're going to work on this in 3 parts. We do this in part so that we have places that I've set up ahead and know that we're going to have question and answers. So there's 3 times that we'll break and have question and answer session, but also so that we can put this video onto YouTube where it'll be available for other people to look at it. And this puts it up in smaller chunks that people don't need to commit to an hour and a half or scroll and look for the part that they want. So chapter 1 is about focus, what I call the need to mess with your focus a little bit and setting the scope of what you're working on. This is copyrighted material. The copyright's mine and my husband's. We are not looking to sell that. We just want to make sure that you know that if you share this with someone, please let them know that this is where it came from and try to let us know how it might be being used. We sometimes run across people who say, oh, I heard you speaking about, and for the life of us, we can't think how we could have talked to somebody who was in Dayton or wherever it is that it happened. So let us know if you want to use the material. In your chat menu is the link to download this outline. I'll be showing you as we go along, and I'll keep you right where we're going. But if you want to keep that for yourself, we put all of those handouts and outlines on our website, so you can find that there. I call it a crystal ball, a chance to look and see what it is that you're asking to have happen, because we all need it. Nobody expects what plants do. Nobody does. I've worked for so many people who all say, boy, it grows different for me. There's our expectations and what the plant really wants to do, and then there's also the changes in environment. This is in the Smokies, and that's a rhododendron. And a lot of people who haven't seen rhododendrons growing in the wild don't realize how big rhododendrons can get, how tree-like they can be. But it's the same thing with, who thinks that these kids are going to grow up to look like what they do or act like what they do, or that we ourselves are going to change into the people that we change into. It's my dad, me. We can't even, most of us, remember from winter, where we are right now, although we do have snow on the ground now, we can't really even picture that it looked like that then, and that we couldn't really see that fence back there that might be driving us a little bit crazy in the winter time. So visualizing change is one of those things that I have to do for myself when I'm helping people design, and I'm doing it so that I can visualize what I'm thinking of doing for someone, and so that I can help them see it too. And I'm going to try to help you that same way. And I start with what I call messing with your focus. I want to blur out the details, soften the edges. I don't want to look at individual things and call them by name. I want to get the overall look and see what's going on out there. And you can squint, which is easy for me to do. I've been nearsighted my whole life. You can spin the lens through a camera. But it takes our focus, our gardening focus, off of these little details like what's blooming and what color it is and whether we like it or not, and lets us step back and even further than that to say that what we want to see is the whole. We want to see the garden. We want to see the landscape, not the individual pieces of it. And I can squint, I can change my focus. I can take a piece of tracing paper and put it over the picture. And if I take a piece of tracing paper and put it over, then I'm looking at what the real focus is there, and it should be on furniture. So if I squint and just try to see just main lines, I will see that the things that stand out, that are circled and framed and drawing our attention, are the things in the middle of the sitting area, are the chairs, that's the real focus, that's what, if we're going to change anything, that's what has to change to make any kind of really major change in that picture. And you can do it with almost anything. You can squint and say, well, what have I got here? What I have in my looking at Mrs. Lamb's front yard was I have a very narrow walk to a non-existent porch. And there's steps, but I can't even see that there's a porch there. There's so much vegetation covering it that I can't really tell what's going on. And that's not necessarily what I want to have seen in somebody's house that's friendly and wants to have people come in. So put something in front of you. Think, I don't need to know whether that's a rock or whether that's a white plant. I just need to take a quick look at something and mess with my focus. And a lot of times there's a blank slate and people say, oh, it's really hard. I have nothing. Besides ugly cars going by. Blank slates are sometimes wonderful to have because you can picture anything can happen out there. But some people have as much trouble with that as they do looking at something like my old garden where there was too much to figure out. So either way, what you want to do is fuzz it out so that you can pick out basically what's there now that's drawing your eye. So if I squint and look here at Niagara Falls at the Botanical Garden, along the hedge where their perennial border is, and I just squint and look at that, the grass in the foreground isn't much of anything. What draws my eye are the high points. There's a peak here. It's not, color is something that we look at, but it's the high points are naturals, the things that stand out above the skyline are naturals. And we need to ask ourselves, is that what I want to look at? Is that where my attention should be? And you can see there's one here and there's one here. They're repeated here and here. You go, you know what that does is it kind of pulls the attention into between the two of them. We'll work later with moving around if we want to move it around. Sometimes when you look, you'll see that this garden, which you spend a lot of time tweaking and deciding what to change and what to do, but it's not the garden that's really drawing your eye, it's the line. It is the edge of the garden that's drawing your eye out and then around through the area. And that all that really matters is that line be beautiful and visible, and in many cases, crisp. That sometimes the only thing that has to happen is maybe we need to move the plants back and have a wider line, kind of like a heavier crayon. And we'll get to that a little bit later too. So looking at, now we're at Hamilton at the road. That was at Dow Garden that you just saw. Now we're at Hamilton at the Waking Perennial Garden in Burlington, Hamilton, Ontario, the Royal Botanical Gardens. And we're standing on an elevated area, getting ready to walk down into the perennial gardens, looking down in. When we look down in, there are 3 high points there that are quite commanding. The plume poppy tops, the tops on monkshood here, and the top of the tree. They're so commanding that maybe before I pointed them out to you, but now that I've pointed them out to you, your attention stays here in this area, and doesn't really let you go over the side. You can walk and stroll there afterwards, but it keeps your attention somewhere. And I start off with telling people, find what those things are. They're not even when they're not blooming, they're still the high points and they're still catching your attention. And sometimes you find that what catches your attention, like that bench there, is being overwhelmed. And it's going to tell you that I need to look at making more of that bench, that there's so much going on all around it. The poor thing is lonely and lost out there. Sometimes your attention is focused going through the doorway. This is at the National Arboretum. Steve's not here, so that I can check that. But I'm pretty sure this is when we were at the National Arboretum. We're looking in at the New American Garden. This is back in the 80s. That you look through the window that the arbor gives you, and it gives you detail and color to look at, like it's framing a picture and saying, this is the focal point. This is what we want to look at. Lines will do that. So the edges of the beds here, so that Longwood Gardens, are both directing your attention right at that Zelkova in the center, which may or may not be worthy of attention. We're going to work on that part. What we want to know is what causes attention. Where lines stop and turn, attention tends to get, we tend to put attention there, sorry. So where the split rail fence takes an angled turn, it becomes one of those places that bugs you and you're not sure why. You want to know, what should I put there? There's a Trillium grandiflorum going to the pink stage here. And you think, I need to put something there. And it's because if you fuzz out the picture, that's what's drawing your attention, is that change in line. And you don't see those things until you kind of get rid of the asking yourself, what's there? What is the name of that plant? And you start looking at where the sweep takes you. This is at Great Dixter, Christopher Lloyd's wonderful garden in the southeast of the British Island. And this is the long border. And you can say, oh, what's that plant? What's yellow there? There's a euonymus in here. There's a golden satin grass here. You can say, what's that plant? But what you're really looking at here is you're looking at a long line that goes to a bench at the end, or you're looking at a line that gets interrupted by gold and pulls your eye up to the top. And those are the things that we're going to be asking ourselves, is that what I want to have happen? And if I want to change it and put something right there, now I know where I want to put it, and I might have some sense of where to start in what you're looking to put there. So I'm picking out the basic focal points. When you've got a busy scene, this is my old backyard sunny garden, and you get to where you have a lot of stuff going on, it can be a little bit, it can start getting too crowded and too much is going on. I had meant for the three grasses to be, and designed around those three grasses, but you can get to where you have to strip it down and say, is that still where I want the attention to be? Now, once I know where my eye is drawn when it's fuzzed out, then I want to say, what group of plants is in there? I call it the focal point in its frame. What's going on around it? I'm asking whether it's significant enough. Is there enough contrast to keep my attention there, even when I fuzz things out, even when it's dim at the beginning of the day or the end of the day when the light is changing? So I'm looking and saying, okay, I have that little pygmy weeping beech, and I've got a surround for it. And together, they are a nice sized group. I think that works okay, or it doesn't work okay. I'm looking to see if those groups do work. This is at a community college where the Master Gardeners classes were being held years ago when I was teaching one of the classes. And we used this as an example of what you could do because they were in charge of this area. You won't see an after for this one. But we looked and said, well, what will we do here? Well, what's drawing my eye there? More than anything else, the flagpole draws my eye. When I look at it from different places, someone has also found that same thing happen, and they framed the flagpole. We do this a lot with tree trunks and things that we feel we must put something there, so they've surrounded it with hostas, which just serves to accentuate its attention. And he said, is that what I want? Do I want to look at that flagpole as I walk around from the parking lot going into the building? Is that what I really want to see? We'll come back to that one. The red door might get your attention. It certainly got my attention. This Marjorie painted her door between the time I first met with her about what we planned and when I came back with the plan. I said, oh, you painted the door red. She said, does that matter? I said, well, yes, it matters. If the thing that you're looking at is a particular color or shape or texture, it pays to use that elsewhere in the design. So we changed some things to get red foliage and specified red annual flowers to put into the area so that we could bring what was getting your attention out further into the landscape. Once I know here's where I'm looking and here's what I'm seeing as a group, as a frame around the focal point, I'm looking to see if it's a comfortable size. Is it too little? Is it too big? So I'm looking at the thing that we put in that was new in this garden is this gazebo. Well, the whole garden was new when we put it in. But the gazebo was the first thing that I designed. The first thing that I said, I'm going to put a gazebo in the corner. And I'm going to put it in the corner. I said, I'm not going to put it in the middle down here. This is how you see the garden for the most part, is out the family room window. And I'm going to put the gazebo over to one side. Once I've got attention on the gazebo, once I've got people looking in that direction, now I want to know how much can I see without turning my head or shifting my eyes. Look at the gazebo now. Focus on it. And probably when you're focused on the gazebo, you can see the plants next to it here. And you can probably peripherally see the blue foliage of this plant here. But this area in the corner is not part of your focus. You have to shift your eyes or turn your head to see that area. And in that case, that makes that fair game to be a separate focal point, a place where I can put something different and not make it look busy. I can design this area as a chunk, as an appropriate space to be seen from that distance away. So since I don't see them together, but I do see them one after the other, this is not the right bench to put there. See, the dark bench that we ended up putting there instead was our better bench because we're looking here, then we're going to look over here, and then maybe we'll look over here. Those are all fair game to be designed separately, looked at separately. So try it here with looking across the yard as you walk up the street to Sue's house, and you're looking into her front courtyard. If you're looking at the Japanese maple here, and that's just your standard bloodgood Japanese maple, they do get that big. If you're looking there, you probably can't focus over here, in which case that's a separate area. For the farther viewer, but worry about the farther viewer later, you might see them together, but for this viewer, you don't. And the same thing can work vertically. If I'm looking at the rocks and the things that we planted in the rocks here at Vince's place, if I'm looking there, I have to shift my eyes to look up the hill. So you can have several different places that you're going to design. And I try to tell people, visualize one piece at a time, one chunk at a time, one viewing area at a time, and then move on to the next area and decide what to put there. And when I do this, when I'm thinking about what am I going to put there, I don't use plant names. I use descriptions. I say, I need something round up there. I need something tall up there. I need something pyramidal up there. I need something, boy, I really, really want more fall color. I need something, we put this tree, actually we put it next door in Ann and Fred's yard, because I just always was envying the sugar maples that I could see in the distance across our old backyard. This is a golden rain tree. It just turns yellow and then kind of does nothing. So I want some color, but I'd like it to be a little bit further back. So we talked to Ann and Fred into letting us buy a tree and put it there. But this color was meant to bring that color down to me. And all I started with was, I want some color. I want something that's got a nice orange or red fall color. And then you start looking from there. And in doing this, the description can be as detailed as you want. It can be based in time, what time you want something to happen, what color you want, what feel you want. I want something that's fine in texture where, for instance, this is Love in a Mist, Nigella damascena. And Love in a Mist has tiny leaves that all blend together in a mass. So it's a fine textured plant, except when the seed pods form. These are the seed pods, at which point that this plant is called devil in a bush, because each of these pods has horns sticking up off the top of it and looks like a little devil's head. Or I might say I want something with a soft look to it, and I want bright color. This is a golden yew, which looks like this if you let it have its new foliage. So you might want to check our pruning guides on, and we've got some pruning webinars posted on YouTube through our website you can find. But if you planted something like this because you wanted the color, then you want it to have that color. And it means for a little bit different pruning and a different description in terms of size, because this can get to be, this is a golden yew, and it could get to be 15 feet across. Maybe, yeah, a little bigger than some people are used to thinking of. Or maybe I want bright color and I can do something mounded. So I'm just thinking, I'm not thinking black-eyed Susan, I'm thinking mounded in bright color. Or I'm thinking, I need something that's got a vertical aspect to it. And I can get those things, I can picture them to use them the same way that I picture the whole scene. I can just kind of fuzz out the details and say, I just want something that's upright. If I can get something that has a good upright character, this is Penstemon Husker Red, which even after it blooms, the seed heads stand up quite tall. So a lot of plants, after they bloom, the seed, as the seed ripens, it causes the plant, it changes the chemical balances in the plant to where the plant begins to elongate and spread outward. This one stays upright because the seed is wind scattered later on. So it's got a nice upright character to it. So does Blue Star have an upright character to it, but it's base shaped. It's wider at the top than it is at the bottom. So maybe vase shaped is what I want to have, is I want to have something that I see a vase type shape. That's all I'm thinking of, and thinking of texture. Is it fine in texture like that Love in a Mist? Or has it got bigger leaves that have areas that reflect light, so they're light, and lots of areas of shadow, light and dark? This is plume poppy, and plume poppy has a lot more coarse texture than feather reedgrass near it, or the mugo pine in front of it. It's got bigger chunks of light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. So I'm thinking, do I want something coarse? Do I want something fine? Do I want something vase shaped? This is a, if you look at just the elderberry here, this is the golden elder. There are several different golden elders. Sambucus canadensis aurea is the native North American golden elder. This one is Sambucus racemosa aurea, which is the red elder that's golden leafed. And it's, if I look at just it is definitely coarser in texture than the yews behind it, yew hedge behind it. But it's not as coarse as the, it's called cow's eyes. I'm sorry, it's called oxeye, and I ophthalmum in front of it. And if I boil those down the same way I did with putting a piece of paper over the top of it, I get more areas of outline for a coarse textured plant than for a fine textured plant. And you get this, it's why people like banana plants and elephant ears, and they put it there and say, that works. If you first say, I want something coarse in texture, you might not have had to mess around so much with trying this and trying that for what would look good with your iris and your goat's beard. Something coarse in texture, like elephant ear. Fine texture in the Russian sage helps the coarse texture of the allium when it's in bloom stand out better. So this is all part of just messing with my focus. I mess with my focus. I said, what's there? What's drawing my attention? What shapes or textures, what elements could I add or change? And in doing this, you have to work through, it's very hard to work through for most gardeners. You have to work through the possibility of change, which might mean that you have to erase something or move it, which is easier to do when you're thinking in the winter than it is when you're doing it in real life. It's just hard to let go. And that means that you have to think about how healthy and what potential do those plants have. I want to make sure that what I'm keeping out there are really keepers. They're really good for what we want to have happen. So I'm looking at the island with the spruce and cotoneaster and mugo pines and blue globe spruce. I'm thinking, what really matters there? What matters there is the blue color and the pyramidal shape and the fact that they serve the purpose of hiding, keeping the viewer from looking into the neighbor's garage. Well, in that case, a frame, the size is not right. It's too crowded. It looks a little, to me, when I boil it down to just lines and messing with my focus, it looks too much like the rabble at the feet of stars there. So I'm thinking I could keep like one globe blue spruce, but I think I need more room around those spruces. And that means I have to yank some things out. And it's a lot easier to yank them out by just erasing them with a pencil than it is actually yanking them out and then saying, what have I done? I will tell you though, that almost all the time when we take things out, we end up better off. We end up saying, wow, that's really kind of nice. So here's a dwarf blue spruce. Dwarf doesn't mean tiny. It just means smaller than the species. And this dwarf blue spruce, which is a Moorheim, I think is the name of this one, it can probably hit 20 feet without too much trouble. And it's sitting with a dwarf Norway spruce and another dwarf Norway spruce. I think that's the snake bark spruce, and a rock. A rock, two pyramidal spruces, and then kind of a coarse thing in the background. But why don't I take one of those out? Move it. And how about something mounded? Or better yet, several somethings mounded, because I need a little more of something than just one next to it. I need fewer stars vying for attention here. I need a group of something. And a mound would be nice. The rock is kind of too flat. Maybe I need just big mounded rocks there. Maybe I need black-eyed Susans. Maybe I need a mounded bird's nest spruce, or better yet, maybe a mounded dwarf white pine. If I've got an idea in my head from sketching things out or messing with the focus, I can, at this time of year, go to botanical gardens. This one is Hidden Lake Gardens in Tipton, Michigan, which has a fantastic dwarf conifer collection where I can stand at a distance, look and say, yes, that one right there, that looks good to me. Then I can walk across and read the tag of exactly what type that is. And in the case of most botanical gardens, there's an accession number that if you ask at the office, sorry, my hand keeps moving my mouse. And I have one of those newfangled mouses that every time you brush your hand on it, it thinks you want it to move. At most botanical gardens, if you stop at the office and ask how to read their tags, they will tell you that the tag tells you what year it was put in. And take my word for it, most botanical gardens start with small items. So you can look and see, oh, well, it took 10 years to get that size. I can deal with that. So you can look and see what it is that you want to have and use in your own garden. It's also a lot easier. This is Patty Shea's backyard when she still lived down here in Bloomfield Hills and was in charge of the Cranbrook wildflower digs. Beautiful wildflower garden along the edge. And we were talking about what you could do. I said, well, I would take some things out. She said, well, I don't want to see through. Well, I don't want to see through either. You want that background. But if you boil that down to what you're looking at, there's a whole lot of just vertical lines. And you could thin that down to make more of the spaces between the lines. And it's a little easier to do that than to bring somebody in and just have them start cutting. You can play around first with what do you want to take out. One of my clients did exactly that. She waited till her husband was gone on a hunting trip. And he did not notice that she'd taken trees out of the back until, summertime at some point. She said it was months later. And then he objected and she said, it's too late. You didn't notice. You didn't notice. You can take out some of the busyness out of the background. And space is a nice thing to have. This is the landscape when we got started at this particular house. A lot of the usual plants use spruce, two dwarf spruces, the dwarf Alberta spruce, the dwarf globe spruce, Japanese maple, boxwood, yews, and a lot of heavy plants, burning bushes put into the landscape. We looked at it and said, do we really need those? You're looking at a bed where we've just gotten done taking out landscape fabric and rocks and mulch, which is awful stuff to put in the landscape. Please, if you have anybody who's thinking about putting landscape fabric down, tell them don't add more plastic to the landscape. It's a mistake. It's a misunderstanding. Don't do it. So we've taken it off. All of the roots are growing right at the fabric. It's almost like pulling tablecloth out from the magician, pulling the tablecloth out from underneath the set table. So you're looking at kind of a messed up bed here. But do we need to hide the foundation? It's brick all the way down to the bottom. Do we need to have that there? If we don't need to have that there, we moved all of the dwarf Alberta spruces. We dug them up from all the places where they were, and we used them as a hedge to around the air conditioning unit and built a bed with them. And they lasted for almost 10 years before they started getting too much brown in them. And then we put in new ones. We just got new ones and put them in 3 years ago. But you can move and change things, and it's easier to do it on paper first than digging things up and moving them around. Certainly easier than Steve will tell you. My husband will tell you that I get us into trouble when I say, sure, we'll just move those rocks over to there. Dwight is showing me how to properly use a come along to move these rocks, which we did move, but you don't really want to have to do in real life if you can do it on paper first. So that's where we are so far, messing with focus, and we're a third of the way through. Are there any questions that you've got about design or about doing that? Because this is now the time to either raise your hand or chat them into the chat field.
I did have one question, Janet.
Uh-huh.
Michelle Armstrong says, if you have a large vase with limelight hydrangeas, would you use medium round or upright to hide the legs? I'm not sure.
Okay, so
Maybe Michelle can explain.
limelight hydrangea tends to have, it's not a suckering shrub, so that it might have 4 or 5 canes coming from down at my elbows, and the top will go out like this. So overall, it's a vase shape. And she's wondering, would I hide the base of it with a mound, or what would you do? Honestly, to start with, I like hydrangeas for their base shape. And to put something to hide the legs would take away the base shape. I would actually say that's the shape that plant wants to be. That's what it's most naturally going to do. Do I need a vase shape there? If I do, I'm going to keep it there, and I'm not going to hide it with the mound. I'm going to put something flat on the ground around it to give it room so that the vase continues to be a fountain. If you hide the vase, it's not a vase anymore. It's just a wide thing. So it depends on whether or not the vase belonged there in the first place. And if the vase belonged there in the first place, I would use something very low to the ground around it to give it enough room that you can still see that vase. If it doesn't belong there, then maybe it needs to go someplace else. The upright purple plant with the pink flowers.
Yeah, I think that you're talking about the Penstemon.
I think that's a penstemon. There's a number of our native penstemons, or beard tongues, as they're called in common name, Penstemon digitalis hybrids that have that upright shape, and a number of them have dark foliage. That one is Husker Red, which has a reddish foliage and pink flowers. There's also one called Dakota Verde. There's one called Black Magic. There are a number of varieties of penstemon, and you should not only grow them but treasure them, because all the penstemons are native to North America. They are our plants, and yet they have been adopted eagerly, enthusiastically, and greedily by the Europeans who want all of our penstemons. And you can say, well, we can grow them better than you can. Are there other questions? These are just our pretty pictures so that we don't have to stare at the same thing while people think about what their questions are. If you don't have questions, that's okay. We can keep on going.
That's all we have right now.
Yep. And that, of course, is the caterpillar that becomes the painted blade, the American lady butterfly. We just opened up its leaf and then saying, go away. So that's all for chapter 1. If you tell someone to view this as a recording, it'll come as a separate recording. This chapter 1 for visualizing change in garden and landscape. Thanks to the Detroit Garden Center for putting it on. And I'm Janet Macunovich from gardenatz.org doing the actual presenting.